Okay, well, welcome everybody to the first ever, I think this is the first ever Wrestling Inc. watch along that we've ever done.
Yeah, it's something new we're trying. We thought in this era of empty arena wrestling, it might be a fun idea to watch some arena wrestling from the past, from the glory days.
Yeah, so what we're going to watch tonight is we're going to watch Saturday night's main event, and this show is from January 3rd, 1987. So if you're on the WWE Network right now and you're looking for the show, it's the first show from 1987, January 3rd, 1987. The show was actually taped in December of 1986, a few weeks before the show actually aired. But basically what we're doing is we're plunging into the deep end of the Hulkamania era. We're plunging into the build-up to WrestleMania 3. This is where I think basically peak WWE of that era would begin to kind of take off. I'm joined here, of course, by Raj Giri, the president, head honcho, owner of Wrestling Inc. And, of course, joining us is Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated. How's it going, guys?
Good, man. How are you?
Great. So, we're going to see wrestling.
To get back into the roots of WrestleMania, Hulkamania. Even that early promo Hogan does in the show, you can see he's got Hulkamania. He knows what it is, but he hasn't quite harnessed it yet. So it's interesting to see, where it is and where it goes. Thank you for having me, guys.
This is classic WWE. This is like when you think of this era, this is the kind of stuff you think of. It's Hogan, it's Savage, it's the other cast of characters that are on board. Some of them have aged really well. I think some of them have aged not as well, but it's a very interesting show.
Yeah, we got an interesting question here from the Heenan family in the chat, asking Heenan and Monsoon or McMahon and Ventura?
It's McMahon and Ventura. I'm guessing he means that person means on the broadcast.
Yeah, commentating duo.
It's Jesse and Vince, and they are both at their peak. Like Vince, I think calls it 20,000 people. Harvard says 20,000 on any day. And Jesse there's nobody. I love Bobby Heenan, maybe a little more my era, but man, was Jesse just like biting. He was raw. There's been nobody like Jesse, at least like you can't picture him doing now what he did then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I feel like Vince and Jesse is the number one of all time, but number two for me is Bobby and Gorilla. And then Gorilla and Jesse, and then JR and Lawler. They bring so much life to a show. Like if the commentary today, if it was Vince and Jesse in their prime on these empty arena shows, I think they'd be so watchable. They'd be easy, they'd be a breeze.
I think that was Bully Ray from or Bubba from Busted Open who said like they should have Vince and Austin do the commentary. He's not wrong. I mean, if you had somebody, and that's not a knock on Michael Cole, you could keep Cole there, but like if you brought in big stars, it would make these shows a little more watchable.
Absolutely. And I don't know about Vince anymore after seeing him on SmackDown a couple weeks ago. He wasn't exactly knocking him dead.
Well, Vince says that he's frequently said like he doesn't want to be on TV anymore, and he's kind of like done being a TV character. And he does, but then he comes out and he makes an appearance. But I don't know. That's different than like he's going to be on Raw for 3 hours. But
right.
So let's you want to get things started here?
AEW did it though. Jericho was like those. He added so much excitement to those shows.
Jericho can basically do anything, and it comes off across as entertaining. I don't know. What works for Jericho is like almost like not working for anyone else. It's kind of like the Michael Jordan documentary, right? It's like Michael Jordan can afford to be like this competitive, and Michael Jordan can like afford to take this many shots and maybe like be this hard on teammates, but it's because he's Michael Jordan. And like, not to say Jericho is like Jordan, but Jericho can do some stuff and
plays in his own realm.
Yeah,
I guess my point to that was though, think of all I still watch on the network, like Raj just mentioned, like Bobby and Gorilla. I can listen to those two. I don't care about the matches.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I like Gorilla. Like if you watch Primetime Wrestling, like which was the weekly broadcast they have, those shows are like nothing. They're just squash matches. There's a lot of times there's not big stars of even wrestling or an appearing, but it's Heenan and Monsoon just carry the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the commentary was a huge part of the show. Now it's, the ring announcing, the backstage interviews, it's all supposed to be unimportant. And when it was important, I mean, Mean Gene, Howard Finkel, every aspect just was so lively, and it just made the entire show so much better.
Raj, I loved the end of the primetime era when they had, it wasn't a round table, but they're like at the table together, and they'd always throw in like Reverend Slick or Hillbilly Jim. It must have been on the payroll that had nothing to do, and they didn't add much to that show, but like it was always a Vince or Gorilla or Bobby thing. But I always liked those odd characters. That was the site of the perfect babyface turn. I think was primetime wrestling.
Yeah,
I think the water on Heenan's head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good memories.
Yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, looking at 1987, what you were talking about, this was January. What was the date again for this?
January 3rd, 1987.
All right, so January 1987, Walk Like an Egyptian was #1 on the charts. Shake You Down. At the box office, it was The Golden Child and Critical Condition. That's a shocker. Richard Pryor, I didn't know it did that well, but Critical Condition. January 1987 at the top of the box office.
Well, historically, January is like not like blockbuster season,
Right.
so you can get some interesting movies sneak in.
And Raj, I'm not sure if you're a big Boston guy. The Boston Celtics.
He's on the wrong podcast. I'll tell you that.
We're defending the defending NBA champions of the Boston Celtics, but that's neither here nor there.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't followed Boston sports, so I know the Patriots, but and
Patriots coming off a brutal Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. It was a big year.
Just about to
Red
happen.
Sox had just blown the World Series too.
Yeah, we're just starting 86, right? No, we're just starting 87. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the Mets are the champions. Congratulations.
congrats, yeah.
Okay, so you want to get started with the show?
yeah.
I hope everyone's synced up and
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and we'll hit play. We'll wait about 10 seconds before starting. We're going to hit play and pause. Wait about 10 seconds so that way if you guys have any ads or anything that show before your stream, we could get those out of the way, and then we'll all start together. So go ahead and hit play, and in 10 seconds we will get started. Go ahead and hit play, get your clock down to 0, and we'll go ahead and get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. This opening theme. So I believe up until 86, they had been using Obsession. And so that was what was on that Firefly Funhouse match, the Obsession theme.
yeah, and that really like kind of sold the Funhouse to me, at least, was like making it as, and even like Cena's promo, which was hilarious. Like he says like, you're gonna pay for a whole seat, but you're only gonna use the edge of it. I love that kind of stuff. That's so goofy. I miss these promos before, like, I shouldn't say I missed them because I wasn't born when this happened, in case anyone's wondering, but I like these kind of like, everyone cuts a promo. This is everyone on the show. This is the show.
I don't think the Survivor Series would have worked without those "What I'm Thankful For" videos.
Oh, those are so good.
Yeah.
The one from the 1990 Survivor Series. It's so good because it's the epitome of everyone's character. It's like perfect Roddy Piper, perfect Rick Rude, perfect Tito Santana. It's everyone.
Even the Rumble with the pictures of and Vince going nuts with like the Earthquake, Andre the Giant, everybody that's in the Rumble. So I agree that it's, to me, it's, and I hate to be too critical this early in the show, but it's that alarming like lack of creativity. Yeah. Why not try new things now? There's nothing you can do wrong in this like Corona era. It's wide open.
Well, if you look at this show, you look at Saturday Night's Main Event from 87, look at it in 85, and look at it in 89 and 90, it's always looking different. It's always changing. The look of the shows has been so much the same for a long time now.
And Raj, I feel like you can close your eyes, or you could probably tell me the next 3 Raws, basically outline them. That's not a good thing.
No. I could easily tell you it's going to open with a promo, a little fisticuffs, sets up a match for later in the show. Zelina Vega and her group come out, they lose a match. I could write it and anyone would believe it.
So, do you think that Vince is jealous that Jesse can wear a sleeveless shirt for the job, and Vince has to wear a suit. Do you think Vince wants to wear a sleeveless shirt? You think he's jealous of Jesse right now?
Remember when he got the chance when Primetime Wrestling moved to the studio and Vince started wearing those
muscle,
right, those muscle suits.
I think Vince always understood the look, the presentation.
Yeah, and Michael the Virus
voiceovers are incredible.
Yeah, the Vince voiceovers in this era. His voice, there's different types of wrestling fans. Some like the Gordon Soley, that kind of style of announcing, more of a sports announcing. But this was like live, like just full of energy and just crazy entertaining.
Visceral, yeah.
Vince calls Hartford, Connecticut, the insurance capital of the world. Is that true?
I think Hartford would take it. They don't have a whole lot else going for it. I mean, home of what? WrestleMania 11, right?
Yeah, the most forgettable WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Okay,
how old was I? I don't know, 10? My father took me to the Fan Fest. I think it was the first time they did a Fan Fest. And I mean, as a kid, it was larger than life. I broadcasted a match with DiBiase. I met Shawn Michaels. I think I still have those. My parents love those photos. Like it was a big deal, but I didn't care the setting as a kid. But obviously, looking back at that Mania, left a lot to desire.
Yeah. So we're opening with Paul Orndorff versus Hulk Hogan. This was pretty common back then. Even now with Saturday Night Live, because it's on so late, they get the big stuff out of the way, get the big rating, and then Saturday Night Live, you have the bad sketches at the end. Saturday Night's Main Event, kind of the same thing. The big stuff was at the beginning, and then you phase down as the show went on. We were talking about Obsession earlier. I still think this second theme, the one that we listened to on the show, I still think that was the best one of all time.
For any WWE show?
Yeah, well, SummerSlam and WrestleMania back then had some good ones, but
yeah, a big WrestleMania theme, yeah.
Right, but the Saturday Night's Main Event, this theme stayed for most of the time after. Mm-hmm. And I think even when they brought it back, I think it had this theme.
Themes too, Orndorff takes the Hogan Real American theme, if you remember. So they both come out to Real American, which is kind of a forgotten Mr. Wonderful part. His stuff was so good, but so it doesn't get talked about very often. I
forgot about this. So Orndorff was like kind of one of Hogan's like first like real big rivals when he first got to the company, and he obviously worked the main event of WrestleMania 1. But they had done an angle where Orndorff was a babyface, and he was teaming with Hogan in 1986, and then Hogan Heenan converted Orndorff, saying he's in Hogan's shadow, and Orndorff turned back to a heel, and now he's back to being the same kind of Paul Orndorff, this time with Bobby Heenan.
Yeah, so they were good friends in '86. They were tag teaming together, and then there was this angle where Hogan missed a phone call from Paul Orndorff, and this caused some heat, and then Orndorff turned on Hogan. And so they were feuding all throughout '86, and it was a big month feud.
Raj, you're telling me two friends ended up... I'm kidding. But it's kind of it works so well, and a lot of that should be... I don't think it's credited to Mr. Wonderful, but it works so well. They basically reused this with Andre, because this started, like you said, early in '86. They read it with Andre. The Savage thing is kind of obviously they added Miss Elizabeth, but kind of a carbon copy of the whole Friends breaking up. Sid Justice, they did with him too, years later. So Vince loved that angle for Hulk.
Yeah, his WWF, his biggest drawing angles, 3 of them were friends that turned on him, with Savage, Andre, and Orndorff, and the one that wasn't was Piper.
So Orndorff, I don't know, maybe he just wasn't, he's not as colorful or as memorable as like Piper or Savage or Andre the Giant, but if you look at actual pure numbers, Orndorff was Hogan's best drawing opponent. He drew more money with Hogan, Orndorff drew more money with Hogan than Hogan drew with anyone else.
Well,
I think his house show attendance and everything like that, Orndorff was the top heel in the WWF for a good 3 or 4 years when Hogan was absolutely on fire.
Yeah, well, Orndorff, he had a match with Hogan in Toronto that drew 76,000 fans. So that, I think, inflates the house show numbers up. I think if you look overall, the number of sellouts and everything, it's between him and Randy Savage. But then Randy Savage also had the big pay-per-view buys.
That's the difference with Mr. Wonderful, too. To me, everything in WWE history is the WrestleMania era. Orndorff doesn't really have Mania moments.
Right.
He's in the he's in the first one. But like, if this headlined to Mania, if this did numbers at WrestleMania 3, but like he just kind of was and then he's there for another year. But that roster is, as we see on this card, is so loaded. They don't need Paul Orndorff. Yeah. So I think that hurts his standing in the company personally.
Bruce Bennon noting that this was really the beginning of the Danny Davis heel turn from referee to the Hart Foundation. Yeah, Danny Davis is one of the referees here. He had been starting to be heelish, and he started wearing the referee wrestler gear after this. And this is a couple months before WrestleMania 3. It was taped 3 months before WrestleMania 3, and it's crazy. You're talking about the WrestleMania moments, Justin. Orndorff here, coming off of a year of being Hogan's biggest drawing opponent, was the backup in case Andre the Giant couldn't wrestle at WrestleMania 3. So just 3 months after this match, even though he lost here, he was very possibly going to be in that WrestleMania 3 main event. Andre ended up making it, and Orndorff wasn't even on the card.
Crazy to think that. I just worked. I covered a indie show. It was Big Time Wrestling. It was a Hart Foundation reunion. It was Brett, Jimmy, and Danny Davis. And I'd never met Danny Davis before, and it was fun because I did it was like a 5-minute interview backstage with Brett before we left the show, and it was fun to see Danny Davis just like be in. A lot of guys are bitter, right? He wasn't bitter. He was thrilled to be around, and he's got like very quietly too some cool memories. You mentioned that he was a big part of early Hart Foundation memories.
Yeah, he contributed to a lot of their heat.
And I remember wondering when I first saw this match, why are there 2 referees? But
right.
I guess we'll find out. Yeah.
So Orndorff, Raj, you mentioned Orndorff headlined the big event in Toronto at Exhibition Stadium, and that drew like 65,000 paid. Which
I think they announced it as 76, but it was legit like 65.
Which, if you
like
compare that to like WrestleMania 3, I know people think it drew 93,000. It didn't. I don't want to start the argument, but my whole point of all that is that if you think about that was not Orndorff's show was not WrestleMania. It wasn't, it was in Toronto. It wasn't like a major show, but he still drew 64,000 with Hogan paid. And that's that was it was before WrestleMania 3, which would make it, I think, the biggest wrestling show in, at least definitely in the United States, in history up at that point, and probably a gate record too. Or it was North American, not in US.
That goes back to the whole poor thing, who knew at the time, but he had bad timing. Everything's, even back then, it wasn't built. I was just thinking about Strikeforce. I don't know why, but how they split, and they didn't have that pay-per-view, and the Rockers didn't either, but Marty was all messed up. But it wasn't necessarily built around Hogan Earthquake, wasn't built around paying that off at a pay-per-view. It still took time to get to that model. And I think Mr. Wonderful is one of those guys who really hurt, and it hurt because he didn't have the pay-per-view. All we do now is look at big moments as pay-per-views. But back then it was all led to these big shows, not necessarily televised across the country, North America. That was in Canada. I feel like he really suffers from that now. He's a much bigger star than we give him credit for.
And we see someone in the chat talking about, he had that really bad injury with his right arm, and it had actually kind of atrophied. So it's actually noticeably smaller than his left arm, but he's still a really good worker, but that's also probably contributed to his shelf life as a wrestler, for sure.
Yeah, so he, after I believe it was shortly after this match, he went and he had the surgery done. And then Heenan brought in Rick Rude. And then Orndorff came back in the summer and it had the feud with Rude, and Orndorff turned babyface again. Never really clicked again. This was basically the end of his WWF run as a top guy. Or
you always hear the stars talking, and Randy Savage would talk, maybe I think it was Scott Hall talked about this, but mimicking Randy, how he learned it. And they said, you never want to lose your spot, right? You never want, and it's kind of an old wrestler thing to say, but it's true. Orndorff not leaves, but he takes care of himself. He comes back. He never has a run again. Yeah. So it's funny that if you leave, especially in that era where there was just so much talent, he was in the main event at Survivor Series, but he never got to that level again.
Yeah.
Well, they had such a loaded roster. Even you said, they leave Orndorff and they bring in Rick Rude. It's unfortunately someone who's going to take your spot when they're that good. And the resources at WWF's disposal, the territories kind of closing down, all that talent needing a place to work, or Vince going out and being able to offer more than they could make anywhere else. It was brutal because unless you were a guy like Hogan, you were replaceable, and that was just the reality of it.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal back then. I mean, when you hear about the schedules that they had, and now it's all organized. So when you're on the West Coast, you're staying on the West Coast for a bit and then moving, southeast, southwest, up north, over months. Then you'd be working in Florida, and then you'd be working in California, and within a weekend, like all over the country.
Well, the business was house shows. You made your money off of paid attendance to shows. You didn't make much money off TV. They would start to make more money off pay-per-view later, but that's how you made all your money, which is why they had so many shows. And nowadays, all the money's in TV, so they actually lose money on house shows last few quarters. And
it's like politics, grassroots campaigning. It's weird. It's like they went places that you wouldn't think they would go either. It wasn't like it was all big cities.
Yeah.
They go to some odd spots. Even now, still. It's kind of like grassroots campaigning.
Yeah, I mean, even Vince McMahon said on the last call, he doesn't know what the future of live events really is going to be or what it's going to look like. If they're no longer profitable, it's like, what's the point? Back then, Bruce Bennon, he pointed out earlier, the Big Boss Man was a big money opponent for Hogan as well. It might have been the biggest as far as live events go. He was making $15,000 a week for 6 months while he was working with Hogan. So you work with Hogan, you're getting that sweet money. So here we're seeing the finish. Hogan got out of the cage. Orndorff got out of the cage. And one referee is saying Orndorff. Yeah, it was amazing. I remember watching it as a kid and being like, what are they going to do? They're going to screw Hogan. Oh, my God. And of course, WrestleMania is going to be Orndorff versus Hogan, with Hogan, going after Orndorff.
And Danny Davis is with the heel. He's with Mr. Wonderful. Joey Morella, the son of Gorilla Monsoon, is with Hogan. Mm-hmm. So everything made sense. The storytelling was so on point.
Yeah, so they got out at the same time. Hogan starts bullying Danny Davis, the referee going for Orndorff. Joey Morella is saying Hogan won outside of the ring. Then Orndorff puts the attack, starts beating up Hogan. Such a great angle.
And they look like cartoon characters. I mean, if Hogan's bigger, there aren't many other times. Mr. Wonderful's huge. I mean, they look like two real-life action figures. It's incredible what guys did to their bodies back then to look as good as they look.
Yeah. No.
Orndorff's so good. His facial reaction, his selling of everything. He's so good.
Voice. I can't do it justice.
Yeah. Howard Finkel, man, that voice. Such an icon.
Everything, and you had the Mean Gene interview beforehand. I loved the Joey Morella moments. Very sad end to his life, tragic end to his life. It's all the big pieces of why do you love WWF in the '80s? Like, this is a great match to show.
Yeah.
Ridiculous outfits they had the officials wear, everything,
Yeah, absolutely. It was so great. They didn't show the replays. I guess they did that after the match.
Yeah, they'll do that later. They'll show the side by side, which it's very unhelpful in my opinion. The side by side doesn't.
That's when Ventura goes.
Well, actually, Orndorff got down a lot faster, and they re-edited it to make it look as close as possible. As close as possible.
Jesse makes the point that I think his knees are bent, something like that. We'll hear it at the end, but
yeah,
kind of contradicting everything Vince is saying, which different era.
That's how it works. The WWF was the first promotion, I believe, to really actually do escape the cage finishes. Every other cage match promotions beforehand were, doing the basic 1, 2, 3 or give up standard finishes. You didn't win by escaping the cage, and WWF was the first promotion to kind of do that, so they could do finishes like this, which work as the storyline.
Yeah, ruined it though with the door. Leaving through the door is the worst. Like, you paid to see that.
Or when someone gets knocked out the door by the opponent.
Yeah. WCW adopted it later, right? In the late 90s. Didn't they have Escape the Cage or?
Well, it's become the standard. I'm sure they did it in Impact too. It's become this. WWE does something for a while, and it becomes the standard. WWF was the first promotion to do 10 counts on the outside. It used to be 20, and still 20 in other places, but it was 10 in WWF. So now any place that's 20 is weird.
Yeah. I believe a title should change on a count out or a disqualification. I think those are you know, if you lose, if it's UFC or a sport or boxing, you lose by disqualification, you lose the title. Otherwise you could be champion forever.
Think of all the good Howard Finkel moments we wouldn't have had, though, had that been the case.
And still.
Yeah.
So Hogan's going to Hulk up. Don't you miss it when guys sold moves and didn't just take moves and act like it didn't happen?
Well, back then it worked so great. But as a kid.
It worked whenever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no hard and fast rule. This is classic. This is...
Yeah.
How loudly would this get booed in 2020 if we had fans in the stadiums? And I don't know,
man.
Like, not Hogan
kind of
doing it now, but this was new.
Oh yeah, they would be. First of all, they'd be like, "Oh, all they did was punch and kick, and there were no moves. The work rate was crap." Hogan just using the same moves over and over.
We didn't even get into Heenan, but Heenan very subtly plays a big role too. Always, Bobby's always involved. Kind of like when you look at Paul Heyman. Actually, Zelina Vega's good at this too. She's always doing something. Like I like the managers. It's like you can't take your eye off them either, because when you do, you miss something good.
Right. Yeah, Zelina Vega is probably the best. One of the best managers. New managers in a long time. I'm trying to think of since when.
Heyman.
I feel like there's got to be someone since Heyman.
They're not allowed to be called managers, but
right, agent / manager. But there's got to be one.
We'll call him what we want.
It's probably not Abraham Washington.
No, because Zelina's still trying to get over her talent while also keeping everything moving and alive.
Well, Heenan's going to get involved in a second, and he's going to do something. He's going to do something that you don't see anymore.
So Hogan,
Bobby did it perfect. Okay. When Bobby took a bump, like he got his ass kicked. Yeah,
well, he's gonna in this. He takes the biggest bump of this match. Bobby Heenan does.
You're right.
Michael DeVira saying, "Yeah, they changed rules now." Yeah, and also pointing out that Hogan could work if you watch his Japan work, but WWF didn't need him to do so. It was a big man style Vince preferred. From a story standpoint. If it's Jack and the Beanstalk, you don't want them doing double drop kicks or anything. You want the giant to be a giant, and then the baby face to be faster and still strong, so it's not unbelievable when they get the win.
Yeah,
this whole thing was perfect too.
So here comes the
pulling him back down, getting back into it. Bobby coming in trying to hold him.
Yeah. So Hogan basically, once the match was restarted, just kicked the crap out of Paul Orndorff.
Yeah, he gets back in the ring, he hulks up. But this is what the people wanted at the time. And you have to remember, Hogan didn't wrestle on TV every week. He wasn't on Raw every week. He would wrestle you'd see a few Hogan matches, I think, a year. You would see him on Saturday Night's Main Event, you'd see him on the pay-per-views, and that was pretty much it. So he didn't get stale the way that a wrestler now would get stale, who's overexposed.
Yeah.
So Hogan, WWE, so he could get away with, not doing that, not changing the formula that much because
you look at Mr. Wonderful there, how he crawled out of the ring. That's the way I look after a workout.
Now Hogan had beat up Bobby Heenan before escaping the cage, and now he's won the match. Now he's beating up Heenan some more. Heenan's selling like crazy.
Jesse lays into Hulk here too, which is really good.
This is where the selling was. Heenan's selling was just insane because he looks really effed up right now. He looks.
Well, this is the difference.
It looks real.
This is the difference between Heenan and other managers, like especially now. Like Zelina Vega is good, but the thing with Heenan was that he would interfere in the matches and then he would get his ass kicked. And you're not going to do that with Zelina for obvious reasons, but Heenan, like what Hogan just did to Heenan, that happened on like every show Heenan was on. He always interfered and then he sold for the baby faces and all worked out. Now I think the managers that or escorts or valets or advocates or whatever WWE calls them, they don't have that kind of role. Like even Heyman, he will occasionally, but Heyman doesn't take those kind of bumps. And like people like Heyman, he's not the devious guy, even if they don't like his wrestler. And people like Selena and they like Lana and they like any obviously hot woman.
But I think that's why I liked the Singh brothers so much. Like they were working.
Yeah, you're right. That's good.
And they're not managers, but they kind of played that role, and they were perfect. And they took some like excruciating looking bumps.
Oh,
had to hurt.
I remember Randy Orton. There were a couple at Randy Orton. throw them like they were
prison,
nothing.
right? Yeah.
One of them, in the Punjabi prison, one of them like fell off the top of the prison, which is like equivalent to falling off the top of the cell, and he crashed through the table. And they didn't set up the crash pad underneath it like they did for Shane McMahon, and they didn't even take the monitors off. He just fell. I can't believe that was like the nastiest bump someone's taken in WWE in like the last 10 years.
Yeah, Veggie
If there's
Gamer
two
saying
more likable talents, like following them. I've never interviewed them. I just watch them on TV. I follow them on social media. I love how they talk about their affinity for Bret Hart, how hard their parents worked for them. Like I think not every guy is better when you follow them on social media. I love following them on social media.
That's true. That is true for a lot of these guys that like their actual real personalities are like super likable, and you don't always see that on WWE television. It's like when you watch the WWE 24s, like oh my god, this person's so likable. They're just like the nicest person, and then you don't see that kind of stuff on the program.
So Veggie Gamer saying Heyman is so stale though, man. He's I feel like his act with Lesnar has gotten a little. Actually, it's been stale. Heyman needs someone to work off of. You see him when he was with CM Punk when they were going off of each other. With Lesnar, he does kind of do the same thing week in, week out. So I'd like to see Heyman get someone else that he has chemistry with, because it's got to be the right person.
There's two schools of thought with that. Like, you use Heyman.
Oh, wait, hold on. Right now, we're going. I got the shirt. I got the Macho Man shirt. And we're going Macho Man versus George the Animal Steele.
Cage down very quickly.
Yeah, right. So I think when they taped this, I think that was the last match of the night.
Probably. Yeah. Otherwise, people would have left. They weren't sticking around for the Blackjack Mulligan.
Right.
Billy Jack Haynes.
Let's listen in to this Randy Savage promo. Can you?
Lovely manager, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you've heard the news. A big surprise coming from George the Animal Steele. Elizabeth, you think it's going to involve you?
Well, anything that affects Randy affects me.
You don't know when to shut up, do you? I'm the champion and nobody cares about you.
George the Animal Steele apparently does.
Don't be contradicting me, you half-pint jughead. Elizabeth, get moving. I should slap your face and put you against the wall.
Well, Vince, I get the impression
anything Savage did was so freaking great. That was a 1 minute promo.
And it's uncomfortable looking back too, because obviously that's not something you'd want to see now.
Can't say it now.
But for the story, I love that Elizabeth has to hold the ropes for him, because when he finally has that moment at WrestleMania 7 after his career's over and Sherry is just kicking the crap out of him, literally, and Liz goes to hold the ropes for Randy, and Randy says no, and he holds them for her. I mean, that's a good 4-year storyline.
Yeah.
Even the opening match, like the best story in WWE or WWF, it was Heenan and Hogan. Like in Bobby on commentary just kind of helped that go, but like it's 92 before Bobby really gets the better of Hulk, right? With Flair winning the Rumble. Those moments, it takes time to have great moments. I think everything's so rushed now sometimes, but I love the Elizabeth Randy Savage story, and the Bobby Hulk story was so good too.
Yeah, and so Savage and Steele, and to your point, Justin, we were talking about Hogan hulking up and no selling. He did that for a long time. So when it finally didn't work, WrestleMania 6 with the Warrior, it was a huge deal.
And that's 3 years later.
Yeah.
I'm sure they weren't thinking that far ahead, but it all worked.
Actually, 5 years later, when you think about when he started doing that in '85.
Yeah.
So George Steele and Randy Savage had been feuding for almost a year at this point. They faced off at WrestleMania 2, Savage obviously retaining. George Steele had a big crush on Elizabeth. Savage took great offense to that, and they had been feuding ever since. And then months later, we would have the epic match between Randy Savage and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. George Steele would be in his corner. I mean, Macho and George the Animal Steele were paired for a long time.
Well, it's interesting to me because George Steele was like a really big drawing heel in like the Bruno Sammartino era, where when Vince McMahon Sr. was in charge. And once Vince Jr. got involved, he, he didn't really like a lot of the older wrestlers. He kind of phased a lot of them out. But for whatever reason, he keeps Steele around, even though Steele is old and not in good shape. I don't know. Vince probably just got a kick out of him. But like you said, he feuded with Savage for basically over a year, and had like a really good run. Like when he was, past his prime. I mean, not to disparage him, he was like a school teacher, and like a really successful, I think, football coach and maybe a wrestling coach too.
Yeah,
in Michigan. and like he's in like the Michigan Coaching Hall of Fame and all this kind of stuff like that. So he would do that during the week, and then he would come, throughout his entire career would go do this on the weekends.
Yeah. I mean, Steele he's an iconic character. I mean, I remember they referenced him on Seinfeld once. So it's, he was in, what was that Johnny Depp movie where he played the old director, Ed Wood? I mean, yes.
Has there ever been a wrestler with more body hair than George Steele?
Jerry Lawler back in the day.
At Steele levels? I couldn't imagine wrestling this guy.
Presented differently. Absolutely.
Tensai?
When I first started
he's bigger, so he's got more ground.
When I first started writing for Sports Illustrated, I was a big Randy Savage story I'd been working on. I was pitching, and I ended up running it with SI, but I did so many interviews. One was with George Steele, and I talked about, like you said, major star, huge part of Savage Steamboat. He's there in the corner at Mania, and George Steele. This is what? I don't know when the story ran. It ran before WrestleMania 31, because that's the year Savage got inducted in the Hall of Fame. But anyways, he was still pissed that he wasn't part of that match. He said his payday was a fraction of what it should have been. So I like the old timers still bitching about their paydays. But that was in Michigan too. So I think he thought that would have been a perfect spot for him to have a match. But sometimes you think of it's hard to separate the character from the person. Of course, you think it's a great moment. George the Animal Steele being ringside. He wanted to be in the ring. So I thought that was a fun little anecdote from the Animal.
Yeah. So
Savage
right here we just saw
a terrible bump.
Yeah, Savage first was going to the top rope. He's going to drop the elbow. Ricky Steamboat's music hit, and out he came. Yeah, they didn't really do that much back then where they hit the music first and they came out. They'd usually just come out. So Steamboat came out.
One of the worst creations in pro wrestling. It's like, who's hitting the music? It's overused now, too.
Yeah. It's way too overused. It takes a lot of the organic feel out of it. Then Steele threw Savage out. Now Steele grabbed Elizabeth and is running to the back.
Yeah, and Jesse Ventura, a very surprisingly woke take by Jesse Ventura, asking, she didn't ask to be saved. She wasn't in danger.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you could do this angle now.
Well,
you'd have to make it, I think, more obvious that Liz didn't like Savage, which was never really that obvious.
On Dynamite, you had Jake Roberts putting a snake on Brandy and then doing that little push-up.
I was very uncomfortable watching that last night.
Which you can do, but in that scenario, at least Jake is the heel. Maybe it's not right, but Jake is the heel. He's doing it for heat. George Animal Steele is the baby face.
Yeah, well, he had Dustin.
Can we go back to Jake Roberts for a second, though? To me, Jesse, the whole lore of the snake is, and I'm getting off track now, the whole lore is the snake's going to get you. So I didn't like that last night with Brandy for a bunch of reasons. It made me uncomfortable. But the snake actually slithering on her, to me, I don't want to. It's the snake's coming to get you. It's like the boogeyman, right? I don't actually want to see the boogeyman. I want to be scared of him. So to me, I didn't like, and Raj, I thought a lot of parts of that were very uncomfortable.
I agree. Yeah, I thought it was I don't know, something from a different era. I don't know.
So there's a lady referee. I didn't know we had those in the 80s. We only had those until recently.
Yeah. I don't remember ever seeing her.
Do you think they had like press releases and stuff to talk about I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is.
If someone in the chat knows, please tell us.
I believe it ended in controversy.
Yeah, so Savage was a heel. Savage was a heel here. 4 months later, he'd be one of the hottest baby faces. And Bruce Brennan pointing out that Savage never turned, but the fans loved his matches and his charisma. And yeah, fans really did turn Randy Savage.
George Steele somehow not counted out here.
Yeah. Well, it's entertainment because the referee was distracted because Steamboat was jaw jacking with Savage. Now,
I think your viewers and your listeners are pretty astute wrestling historians, but if anyone's a little bit younger or unfamiliar with George the Animal Steele, it's hard to describe the excitement you felt watching him rip open a turnbuckle.
Oh,
it seems ridiculous, right? But it was like cutting edge stuff in 1987.
Yeah. You never forget it because he was the only one that did it. It was such a trademark.
I can't even really think of anything similar to that. Like he would do something like to the ring, and it became like this iconic thing. I don't think anyone's ever really.
wasn't like making a point. He was just.
Well, I think back in the
Yeah.
60s when he first started doing it, it was the idea was like, this guy's crazy. He's like, the crazy monster heel. And at this point, he's beloved. So it becomes like the, iconic thing as opposed to like the scary thing, which happens with all monster heels that eventually become baby faces.
Yeah, funny how Vince did that with, like you mentioned, his old timers earlier. The ones he kept, like Gorilla Monsoon, they had a great relationship. Gorilla became his beloved, commentator. He was a massive heel. George Steele, same thing. Obviously, a much different role, but a beloved babyface. So yeah, funny how the major heels of that era, even Killer Kowalski, I feel like all those guys, those bad guys, were also lovable in their later years.
I remember my dad, because my dad watched wrestling before I did. I wasn't allowed to watch until this year. This 87 was when I first started really watching. But he would tell me how scary the Animal was back in the day, and what a dangerous heel he was, and I just could not understand it. Like he's such a cuddly teddy bear, but you see the tactics he's using with the biting, and you could see how he could be a scary heel.
Oh, definitely.
All Hall of Famers we've seen so far. I think almost everyone on this show, everyone in the match is a Hall of Famer.
Look what we saw. We saw Hogan, Mr. Wonderful, Heenan. You saw Fink. You saw Dangerous Danny Davis. Someone quickly said, "Hey, the Heart Foundation program, like all iconic stuff." Then you see Savage, Elizabeth, George Steele, Ricky Steamboat. It's like we're on the second match,
right? Yeah, I mean that's a lot of greatness right there.
Well,
yeah.
these shows would, like we said, they would kind of peak early, and they do the biggest match first, and then do the second biggest match. And now you couldn't do that, but you're right, Raj. Like it's the Saturday Night Live kind of model. It's like you do your biggest stuff first,
right?
So people are tuning in, and then hopefully they stick around and keep watching. And obviously, this is, I think, what is this? The 13th? I think it's is this the 13th show? So it's a formula at this point.
Another thing too, speaking of iconic, and CM Punk tapped into this, but that Savage attire, the stars, man, so special.
Yeah. Macho Man.
You don't do that.
It was one of those. It was one of those weird things where he has these weird sunglasses and then pink tights with stars on them and boots that don't match, and comes out to the graduation song with the gorgeous, sweet looking lady, and all that together, and it just works, and it's just iconic.
He was just so intense.
Yeah.
So he used the ring bell now. The ring bell, of course, he had crushed Ricky Steamboat's larynx with it.
Yeah.
In 1986, which is when Steamboat came back. I don't know, when the first time he came back. Oh, he comes back again. But I think this is like his return from the larynx injury, which of course would set up their iconic match at WrestleMania 3 in a couple months.
Yeah, I think Steamboat had just come back like a couple weeks before this. And this is like his second appearance. He hasn't wrestled yet, I don't think. Mm-hmm. And so Steamboat, Randy Savage is going to the back. I feel like every Saturday night's main event, at least one of the big matches was a DQ. I'm not sure what this is.
I think this is a clean finish, because I think the referee ended up counting him out. I can look. Let me just look up real quick. Yep, it's a clean finish. He defeated George the Animal Steele. He pins him at the end.
So this isn't over yet.
Well, you already pinned him.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. No, he hits him with the ring bell, and then he pins him.
Knocked him out.
Oh, I thought he hit him and then Steamboat came out. Okay, oh man, that's my head. Yes.
How do you make the animal feel better? Feed him some turnbuckle.
This is actually like real good character work from him, his facials and his expressions, and like needing to be comforted by the turnbuckle. It's actually like real good acting.
Yeah. I'll come down on some of the gimmicks today. Saying they're way too beyond the pale to connect, but I mean this was pretty out there.
I think of him more as a modern day bushwhacker, and that's not fair but the bushwhackers are very, very good. Yeah. But Otis has a little bit of George Steele to him. I mean, Otis has a lot of that old school throwback kind of character vibe in his presentation.
Well, Steele, Savage, and Elizabeth is very similar to Ziggler, Mandy Rose, and Otis, not nearly as iconic or anything, or as memorable, but it is probably in a lot of ways the best storyline WWE has going.
And that probably would have been, I mean, you can imagine that eruption that happened at WrestleMania in front of a live crowd. But when did that start? November? Was it the Ham with a hug? But like, it was one of those like organic, like the crowd just roared. You used to hear that all the time. But I agree, that's one of those things. I don't know if they knew it would ever be that big. I don't think so. But they kind of worked themselves into a huge deal.
Yeah.
So here's Harley Race. Harley Race can't be Harley Race. He has to be the King Harley Race.
It's funny. I didn't realize what a badass Harley Race was until years later.
Well, I
remember when they would book Harley Race against Hogan. I'm like, he can't. Why are they putting him against Hogan? He's not a threat.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that if you like, when they talk about him in this promo, they don't mention that he was, the 8-time NWA champion. They don't mention him. They hype him up, but they never acknowledge that this guy is like, at this point, like maybe one of the biggest legends actively wrestling in 1987 as far as like totality of his career.
They bought him one of those cheap crowns too. They didn't even buy him like a legit. Look at this thing. It's literally like it's coming around his neck or his chin.
Harley Race, when he dyed his hair this color, he looks like he's 65 years old. Like they aged him so much with that hair color. Yeah, he looked much younger when he had the dark hair.
He looked younger managing Vader. I mean,
yeah.
Well,
Harley Race was awesome. I remember the first time I interviewed him, I was a little nervous because he's kind of like the man's man. Mm-hmm. It was you don't want to ask him, you don't want to set him off or say something stupid.
Well, Harley wrestled such a physical, bump heavy style, and he worked so often and he traveled so much that unfortunately by this point in his career he doesn't really have that much left. But if he had been presented as like the multiple time NWA champion and he was presented as a true legend of the industry, I think he would have done better, because people would have maybe gotten over the fact that he wasn't maybe like physically all the way there. If he's a legend, the same way people think like Goldberg, people react still to Goldberg.
You don't mention the number 2. I agree.
You can't. And he had Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL never mentioned the XFL on air, and you don't have UFC mentioning Bellator. You don't mentioning them kind of brings them to your level. So I always understood not bringing up their mentioning that he was the NWA legend. I mean, you could say that. I don't know.
I feel like you could have drawn more money with him that way. I mean,
you need to. If you have Hogan, you're already drawing.
Yeah, but not forever.
My favorite King Harley Race moment was from like classic WWF. It's the feud with Duggan, and they fight all over the Slammies. That Slammies, I believe, was the first one. It was the 37th annual Slammy Awards. Do you guys remember that? Like typical, they called it the 37th annual Slammy Awards. So.
Yeah. Was that the one with Vince with Stand Back?
It must be, right? And yeah, they're stuffing cake into his face, and what a weird number to pick if you're going to make something up. 37.
It sounds legit because if you said 40th, then it would sound like it could be made up.
Right.
So Harley Race facing JYD, they would go on to have a rematch at WrestleMania 3. And
Two more legends. I mean, match after match. This is a loaded card.
Well, it's such a ridiculous roster because, I mean, look at this. You got Harley Race, who comes from the NWA. He comes from, like Kansas City territory and then later Mid-Atlantic. But, he ended up, having to go when WWF first went national. Harley Race threatened. I think he said, I'm going to go into the locker room with a gun if they come to Kansas City or if they come to St. Louis. I forget the city. He hated the national expansion, and then 3 years later, Vince has got him wearing a crown
and look, we got an inset promo from Roddy Piper. So talking about the greatness on this show. Goodness gracious. If you go back and watch WrestleMania 8, you have Hogan, Flair, Savage, Piper, Brett, Shawn Michaels. The Road Warriors did a promo. Lex Luger did an inset promo promoting the World Bodybuilding Federation. Sid
I was
Vicious.
complaining earlier about the music playing, but I love when the Warriors music plays at the end of that show. That was awesome.
Warrior,
That show's
Undertaker, Jake
show-
Roberts.
I just rewatched that show. That show's so bad. I know it has all the star power, and I know it has all the big names, but if you look at that, the last 2 matches end in DQs.
They should have ended with
bad.
Savage and Flair. If
But
they had
Hogan-
switched
Hogan
Savage and
versus
Flair
Sid
with
was
Hogan and Sid.
Hogan versus Sid was the bigger match at that time, as hard as it is to believe.
Yeah, but if you're not going to have a finish, even though you did have the Warrior coming back, and when I was younger, that was enough. Like, Warrior coming back was just awesome.
It was a big match, Jesse. You're right, because it was presented as. It's so funny to think that was presented as Hogan's last match, right? Like that was the whole backstage interviews with Vince if he was going to retire.
Yeah, it was teased heavily as like he didn't know. Like he asked him, and Hogan like looks in the camera. He's like, basically like, I don't know if it's gonna be my last match. Which I feel like John Cena's kind of doing that gimmick now.
But you wonder why they couldn't have made it work with like if Flair was winning. I get why you want Hogan to go last because Flair was never their guy, especially then. But with Savage winning the belt, you could have easily ended that show with Savage, done something with Hogan, still brought the Warrior back, Papa Shango, tied it all in. I don't know. I wonder that. I guess they were just so comfortable with Hulk.
And that match was more heated, I thought, than the Sid and Hogan match.
Oh, she was mine before she was yours. Yeah. Sure.
But I know that when they drew when they did like the house shows and stuff, it doesn't age well. But Sid was a bigger opponent for Hogan than Ric Flair was. Sid was a big star when he first showed up.
People give Sid crap, but I thought I was every time Sid was on, I was watching.
WrestleMania 13 too. I know we talk about Taker, but like Sid was a big star that hey, he could headline a Mania with the belt.
Yeah, but Sid never really drew that well. He got a million opportunities. He did draw well at the Hoosier Dome at WrestleMania 8. But, Sid would get a big push in WCW, wouldn't draw. WrestleMania 13 is like the worst drawing WrestleMania in history.
But no one was drawing that year. Bret Hart wasn't drawing. Undertaker. It was just the worst drawing year.
And then Sid went back to WCW, and he didn't draw there either. So,
but when he went back, WCW was on the decline. He wasn't like a difference maker.
Yeah,
he wasn't an Austin who was? You can't single Sid out.
That Survivor Series match too, where he beats HBK, like that crowd, and I know there was a lot of it was like anti-Shawn working with Jose Lothario, but
I was at that.
That place was electric for Sid. That place like riots if Sid doesn't win. And Sid, I think, was the video camera, right? He smashes him with that crowd was rabid for Sid.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was at the rematch at the Alamo Dome, but yeah, that was I believe at Madison Square Garden, the pop when Shawn Michaels was their pusher, their biggest babyface. He was kind of faltering then. The fans were really turning on Shawn. The ratings were falling. And Sid, there was some interest. They just never. Sid wasn't as committed, and they never got that right opponent for Sid as a babyface.
In 1992, Meltzer wrote, "The Sid package has the world's best wrapping paper, but it has absolutely nothing inside."
Yeah, but that's Meltzer's idea of wrestling is.
But it's kind of true because he'd come in. And he'd like, oh my God.
But that wasn't the case in 92. He hadn't done that yet.
But he comes in.
I like that 92 run. Like, I think he adds to SummerSlam. He adds to the Rumble. He adds to that whole. SummerSlam 91, I thought he added a lot. Will he, won't he? That was feud with Hogan. It didn't end well because, again, it ended poorly at Mania. We're overlooking JYD here. But I like that whole run from 91, 92 Sid. Jesse, you're right. It didn't have the longevity, but that's a nice song, Raj. He was a good guy to have around. I'm with you. He was a good guy to have on the team. Maybe not your star player.
Yeah, and again, I'm not taking a shot at Dave, but he likes the the Japanese style of wrestling, and he would rip on Hogan versus Andre, but that's the biggest WrestleMania 3 is one of the most iconic matches, of all time. The Hogan versus Andre did 33 million viewers on NBC. So, there's.
Did Sid do 33 million viewers?
Did
I'm not. I'm just saying, I don't want to dunk on Sid the entire time, but Sid got pushed in every promotion he was ever in, and with the exception of WrestleMania 8, which he was hot for, but he just.
Jesse, I'd be curious that rating. I'd be curious that it was a Saturday night's main event, or it was on Fox though. I think it was the one when Sid turned on Hogan. It was Hogan and Sid versus Flair, and I think Taker.
Yeah, think about that. That's kind of a crazy one.
I know, and Sid like doesn't tag him. He doesn't. I'd be curious. I don't know off the. I'd be curious the rating on that show, like how well, because that was Sid and a bit. Now, granted, Flair was there, Hogan was there, and a young Taker. But I'd be curious how that match did. That was like the big match of the night, if I remember.
Yeah, you're right.
I think Mountie Piper may have beat Mountie for the belt that night too. Maybe.
Didn't he beat him at a house show? Or no, Mountie beat Bret Hart at a house show.
Right.
So Danny Davis is getting a big run here. This is his second match involvement. JYD would actually because they would run so many house shows, they would do 3 tours concurrent, and JYD would be the main event on a lot of the they call them the C-level tours, but he headlined a lot of tours for WWF, and drew well, even though he wasn't really pushed at the same level as like a guy like Hogan was, obviously.
Yeah. Another guy that kind of fell victim to that didn't last till if he's there at WrestleMania 5 having a big moment. We remember him a lot. I mean, we still remember him fondly, but a lot differently. I feel like if he lasts a couple more years,
he was such a big star in Bill Watts' territory in Mid-South, and he did shows. I think he wrestled the Freebirds at the Superdome, and they did like 28,000 people. Like he was a legit massive draw, and Vince could outbid Bill Watts at the time and took him. And he JYD did well in WWF, but he was never like kind of that kind of main event star the way he was in the UWF.
Yeah, I mean, the product placement here, by the way.
So you were talking about that Saturday night's main event where it was Sid and Hogan. That one did an 8.2 rating. The one after that did a 6.2. So huge difference with the one after Sid. Granted, you also had Hogan, Flair, Taker. You're right. Roddy Piper defeated the Mountie on that one. You had Savage defeating Jake Roberts. So ton of star power. But
that was a weird. I shouldn't say weird, but that was the end. I think to that. That was pretty much the end. No, was that the end of Savage and Jake? It may have been.
Yeah, because then Savage went to the world title.
Right.
And then Bobby and Paul Orndorff cutting a promo.
I think we're gonna get the Zapruder film in a second. Yeah, I mean, we talk about ratings. This show did a 10.6 rating, which my conversion math, I think, is somewhere at approximately around 20 million people watching this, which is like
insane when you think
what did Raj do this week? 1.8 million or something like that on average.
Yeah, the rating is probably like
I mean, you can't. There's a huge difference between TV back then, and you had main primetime shows and TV doing 40 million people or something like that. But to think that 20 million people were watching one wrestling show in the country is pretty crazy.
But this was highly rated for back then too. Like
there was NBC wasn't putting stuff on Saturday night.
It's the reason they're on NBC, right?
Yeah.
And it was beating what Saturday Night Live was doing at the time. Mm-hmm. Usually, at least in this period. I think that changed in 1990, but
there's that period of Saturday Night Live where Lorne Michaels wasn't part of the show, where the show really dipped. I don't know the exact years off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, to do 20 million viewers is insane. A wrestling show will never do 20 million again.
Mm-hmm. I always love how they're looking at the same thing. Vince and Jesse, they're replaying Orndorff and Hogan. They're both saying the opposite.
And Vince is so sure. He's so sure. That's what really. I'm sorry, Jesse Ventura is so sure. Like that's what really sells it. Is that like it's this thing where it's like as the viewer, I'm like I don't know really who hit first, and like he's just totally like convinced of it.
Yeah. Justin Toner's asking if it was the one where Sid turned on Hogan. Yeah, yes, it was. Look at this. Adrian Adonis. He's not in the Hall of Fame, right?
I don't think so.
No, he's not.
He's the first one that we're seeing.
Say that. Let's see.
I hate to keep bringing up Sid real quick because Jesse's wearing red. I think because Sid never wore the red tights. I'm sorry this has turned into a Sid hour, but I feel like Sid Justice had the red tights on that. I don't know if anybody can remember that, but he never wore red. Like he wore blue, he wore black. I feel like he had red that night.
Well, if this goes well, Justin, we'll eventually get there.
I always hated, and this will be the last thing I say on Sid unless you say something else. But I always hated they didn't give him a last name when he came back. I always thought Sid Vicious. It just sounded like a main event name more than just Sid.
Right, and I didn't like Psycho Sid either. I'm with you.
Yeah,
I didn't like the on Psycho, and yeah, I'm with you. You needed a full name.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'll say this about Adrian Adonis: he threw everything he had into this gimmick. He didn't. This is kind of I would say like a losing gimmick, but he tries so hard to do it, and he's got Jimmy Hart with him that it actually manages to work.
Yeah. Gabe Tubb.
They were red that night.
They
All
were
right,
red.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think
I
at the
wish I could
barbershop
say
when he
that
was with
outside.
when he destroyed the barbershop when Sid did, he was wearing the red as well.
Was he? Good
And
memory.
when that shaving cream on his face, it was so such a cool visual. Now look, Roddy Piper, you have this late in the show. That's shows you how stacked the Saturday night's main event was.
Just real short. I don't have a lot of words to say about this. This guy's humiliated me. You know, I mean,
My personal Mount Rushmore of my personal wrestlers, two of them are on this show, Savage and Piper.
Who are the
they're
two?
great.
Sid?
Rock and Austin. I mean, Austin and Flair, but Rock is right there.
No Sid.
Sid's on
six.
I'm done with Sid, but I'm gonna go on a Jimmy Hart. Sid, I don't think he ever was Sid Vicious. He was
Rusty's
definitely
asking.
Psycho Sid. He started as Sid Justice, and he was just. I think he was Sid before he was Sid Vicious. Before he was Psycho Sid, he was just Sid.
Sid Justice was a cool name too.
Agreed.
The Sid, so there's the video package that they did in WCW. I think it was like for like maybe Bash of the Beach 93 or Beach Blast 93, where Vader and
On the
Sid
beach.
are on the beach. Well, Sting and I think it's Davey Boy Smith are like playing beach volleyball with like some orphans or something on a beach, and then like Harley Race, Vader, and Sid are on like a boat, and they fire like a missile at the beach or something, and there's a little person, and it like is one of those unintentionally hilarious things you can find in wrestling.
I think it's the first season of the Edge and Christian show when they had the network show, and they did a scoop on that. It's early on, and it's like wet yourself, laugh out loud. They were so funny the way that I'm gonna go back and watch that after this, but yeah, some ridiculous stuff.
So
I need
leading
to
up
find
to
out.
this match, if you remember, WrestleMania 3 was supposed to be Piper's retirement. That's what it was built as.
How'd that turn out?
Yeah, he's still got like 10 more years of stuff. He's going to main event Starrcade 96.
Hey, he even won the tag titles in this century with Ric Flair.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah, so here it's Flair and Adrian Adonis.
Old school is cool, something like that.
So,
Yeah, but so you have two matches here that were also at WrestleMania 3 with Piper and Adonis, and then JYD and Harley Race, and then
So-
Hogan and Orndorff almost could have been if Andre couldn't go.
So Adonis is heavy in this match. He's not really in great shape, but you can see how good of a worker he is by the bumps he takes. He does such a good job.
Yeah.
Jesse, I love you say not in great shape, but I love the variety of bodies, the shape.
Yeah.
Right, like it's been. The first match they were both jacked to the gills, but then you had George Steele, you had Randy Savage. Steamboat is jacked too. There's
JYD
Adrian
Race.
Adonis, JYD, Harley Race. Like they're all a little bit different body wise. I feel like you don't see the shapes and sizes quite like that anymore.
And they're all
but you're right,
characters.
Adonis is huge here. What's
Yeah.
that?
They were all characters, and part of that was their body different, the different body types that they had.
Well, someone said something like, someone told me when I was talking about Keith Lee, they were saying like Keith Lee's fat, like he should like wear a singlet or something. He should cover up his belly. And I always thought like it actually kind of like makes him look more impressive, where you see like how big he is and like see his athleticism as opposed to hiding that. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
If Keith Lee's fat, I got a lot of problems.
Keith Lee looks like a football player athlete to me. I just think him and Dijakovic, I feel like they don't utilize their strengths quite enough, and that being big guys. And when you're doing everything that everyone else is, yeah, you impress guys for a little bit, but it gets old fast.
It's funny, Raj, it goes back to your point with Hogan Orndorff. If they were doing double drop kicks,
Right.
you know what I mean? Sometimes big guys should be big guys. I like Keith Lee, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
he's
I like
great.
him too.
And I think you break those out once in a while,
Yep.
and it just enhances it that much more, as opposed to where you've seen 50 dives in a Dijakovic match on TakeOver.
I think of Jim Neidhart with that because
Yeah.
when he did the drop kick, which didn't happen, more than once a match, like the anvil, the drop kick was special, but
Yeah.
it didn't happen a whole lot.
Yeah, like if Keith Lee, if we had never seen him do a move off the top rope, and then at a WrestleMania you see him climb up slowly and it just builds, and then he does it, it would be remembered forever.
Blow the roof off, yeah.
But I mean, everyone likes wrestling for different reasons. For me, it's always been the characters and storylines. And then if you have a great match on top of that, then it's perfect.
So, unfortunately,
Now,
like
Jesse,
a little.
I hope I'm in the right spot as you guys. Jimmy Hart just got nailed by Piper.
Yeah.
All right. So Jesse made the point earlier. You don't see managers take big bumps. Like that's the bump you're used to seeing with a manager. Like Jimmy flailed back, right? Like Bobby took. You mentioned it, Jesse. Bobby took like brutal bumps.
Yeah, he was the best bump taker in the company.
Yeah.
But that was the whole idea, was that he was the evil heel manager and he got his comeuppance like every single week. And now it's like you don't see that guys put their hands on managers. You don't see like the guy interfering, and then like a lot of times it's because Vince doesn't like managers, with the exception of Heyman. And when instead of managers, he uses women, which is fine. But you're not gonna get the baby face punching the heel woman. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
I'm smiling because of Adonis's celebration. I
totally forgot that Adonis won this match. Adonis winning by countout. He sprayed Piper outside the ring with this cologne. Piper is blinded. So Rick Martel stole Adonis's gimmick here.
Arrogance before arrogance. Yeah.
Well, Gorgeous George used to have his perfume and spray it in people. Unfortunately, Adrian Adonis, only a year later, he unfortunately died in the auto accident. And someone mentioned in the chat that there's so many of these guys are no longer with us, and it is true. And obviously, dying in an auto accident is different, but a lot of these guys, unfortunately, the physical toll that they took, the lifestyle is so difficult that unfortunately a lot of these guys did not live into old age.
Well, I mean, almost everyone on the show, Adonis, Piper, Savage, Steele, JYD.
I think
Race.
he had a heart attack while driving.
That was Savage.
That was Macho.
No, I think. Let me look up JYD because I think that
JYD was in a. I believe he was in a car accident, but
he was.
Savage
I remember he was
a
driving
heart attack.
back from his daughter's graduation.
Joey Morella too, I believe, because I remember
he died too.
Howard Finkel.
I think Morella was with
that was a car accident.
Harvey Whippleman on the New Jersey Turnpike, which is like a super dangerous stretch of road. I remember reading that in the magazine as a kid. Joey Morella died and just not being able to understand it,
Right. And I remember finding out that he was Gorilla Monsoon's son when it happened. Because I didn't know, as a kid, I read Pro Wrestling Illustrated and it was all kayfabe.
I think if you go back, I think now that Jesse will occasionally throw a tiny bit of shade his way, during it, what do you know about that referee, Gorilla? And you thought oh, it's Jesse. He's just trying to get under Gorilla's skin by saying he's friends with the referee, and then it's oh well, they're he's his son.
Or when Jesse would call him Gino was always fun too, like a little peek behind the curtain. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's got a lot of hair here.
Yeah,
are they in
it's
the
weird seeing him in the
bathroom?
jacket. He looks weird in the jacket. Something just doesn't seem right.
Maybe if they did run the film backwards like those old cartoons.
It might be Jesse, by the showers. You might be right.
Yeah, that's where I think they are.
Looks
so. It kind of
knows
seems like here they're setting it up where Orndorff could slide into the WrestleMania main event. They were basically saying that there's going to be an investigation.
That would have been so anticlimactic.
We'd have to look, but I'm sure they're still working house shows too, right? It must.
Yeah, and that was their main money source back then.
Yeah, but I mean, pre-Mania 3, right up to there, they must still be working some house shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. I feel like they worked a bunch of steel cage matches in late '86, because this is December '86 when this was taped.
Yeah, so they had been pretty much working all year.
So we got the Battle of Texas here, and out of all the wrestlers from Texas that are active at the time, we're getting Jimmy Jack Funk and Blackjack Mulligan, the two biggest wrestling stars from Texas, to settle this. This is the TV main event, I guess,
which people in Connecticut love. Two Texans going at it. Jimmy Jack was infamous for the Rockers. He was part of that when they got fired. He was the guy that, he was part of that bar scene, the big thing that got Sean and Marty fired the first time.
So Blackjack Mulligan, a few years are away from going to prison for counterfeiting, which was recently in the news because it was mentioned in the Dark Side of the Ring Herb Abrams episode. That Herb Abrams mentioned that Blackjack Mulligan was going to be his booker, and Blackjack Mulligan was in prison at the time because he was making a bunch of fake $20 bills.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It
he
happens,
made.
right. You know,
He went to jail. So Blackjack Mulligan, he is the father of Barry Windham and Kendall Windham, and then his daughter married Mike Rotunda, aka the IRS Man, and then obviously the IRS Man's sons are Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas.
Yeah.
So he's kind of a patriarch of quite the wrestling family.
and I feel like one of those kids is it Bray's child. One of them is named Wyndham, I thought.
Bray's name is Windham
Yeah.
Rotunda.
Okay,
Rotunda.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
One of the kids too. One of the kids has some wrestling name. I thought one of the children. It must be Bray's.
Just had a kid also. Yeah. Because Bray's married to JoJo, right?
But I think he had kids with his. I don't know the story. I thought he had kids already, but I know that she had a baby recently. They posted it on social media. But
was
I don't
this
know.
kind
a
of
lot
the?
about-
Oh, sorry. Yeah, JoJo and Bray, right?
Yeah.
And not to go overly Boston on you, Raj.
Jose
but
Offerman?
JoJo's father, Red Sox second baseman Jose Offerman, the phantom tag against the Yankees in '99. Chuck Knobloch was out. Sorry about that.
I don't know what the hell you just said.
Jesse's wearing the hat. I got to wrap him.
Yeah.
It's funny. Other than football, most of the stars today I don't really know, but I remember back in this era,
someone,
Jordan, Tyson, and Hogan was. I mean, he wasn't as big as those guys, not even close. But this era had these iconic celebrities and stars, Michael Jackson, that you don't see today anymore because of how much there is out there. You know, LeBron is an icon, but he's nowhere near what Jordan was.
That's a good question though. Like wrestling icons, Hogan for sure. You think pro wrestling, you think Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
I put The Rock just because he's been so big in Hollywood.
Yeah, the outside of wrestling really.
Right. I think Flair more lately, he's become a pop culture icon. Hip hop helped with that a little bit or a lot.
Flair's age, his character has aged more than Hogan. Like people still want to copy Flair, people don't want to copy Hogan.
And maybe Cena. Like there's not a whole lot of guys. Austin too, but Austin, I'm always amazed at Steve Austin's acting career. Like his agents, what were they doing? He should have been maybe not The Rock, but he should have been a major movie star. Steve Austin.
Yeah.
It depends on how far back you want to go, and like if you want to like just stick to America.
Yeah.
When it comes to like true iconic names.
Yeah, we're not talking Ricky Dozan and
Ricky
Dozan, legend out.
I'm saying we're just talking American wrestling because
the airport in Pyongyang is named after Ricky Dozan.
Yeah,
in fact. So this is kind of that was the end of the matches. Blackjack Mulligan won with a back elbow.
I should say Jesse Ventura. You could make a claim. Jesse did some things outside of wrestling that made him very, very relevant in American mainstream media as governor. It's hard to believe watching this. If you said Jesse Ventura is going to be governor someday of a state in the United States,
just a couple of days ago, he took his name out of the hat for running for president.
What's that?
Just a couple of days ago, he took his name out of the hat for running for president. There was a little talk that. He might step in. I didn't think it was ever actually really going to happen, but
Bruce just mentioned Andre the Giant 2, Princess Bride. Andre's still very relevant too, so I agree. Andre, Savage too, yeah.
The Undertaker.
Undertaker is not. He's with wrestling fans for sure.
I think that there's with people of a certain age, there's a definite awareness of who the Undertaker is.
I'm sorry, Jesse. What were you saying?
I think there's just an awareness, people, even non-wrestling fans, oh yeah, the Undertaker. If they have any familiarity with wrestling at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because Taker was never the main guy. Goldberg. He was never as big as Goldberg as Goldberg was in '98, right? But longevity-wise, it's insane. I mean, he's probably arguably the biggest ratings mover when he shows up right now.
His character's so memorable, though. That's part of the thing is that, he's the dead man. He wasn't as big of a draw as Goldberg was in his prime. But
the greatest creation and I wouldn't consider a lot of people like Hogan's not to me.
No,
he's an AWA. That's where he was. That's where it was. The foundation was laid. But to me, Undertaker, even Brett. I don't know if Brett's pretty homegrown, I suppose. But I think Taker is the most iconic, greatest WWE creation. I don't think there's anybody better.
The Rock.
It's as far as creating a gimmick. Because The Rock's not really a gimmick.
But he's a very much like obviously you could say his success as a movie star is relatively doesn't have that much to do with WWE now. But like The Rock, like as far as like being someone who was signed very early to a WWE contract and was given a tryout very early.
I guess longevity would be the difference there, right? Because Taker, nobody can compete with. I mean, that's like 3 decades. It was Survivor Series 90.
Yeah,
Rock's a good guy. Rock also a Survivor Series debut. Taker's debut was in Hartford, right? That was the 90s Survivor Series in Hartford. So,
yeah, I guess I just mean like where you're taking something out of nothing and creating a character. Like, when you see The Rock, like the name, it was either Vince Russo or Jim Ross. They'll debate who came up with it. But where Vince came up with something, and I guess even Undertaker was not his idea. Undertaker was apparently Bruce Pritchard's idea, and Vince took it to a whole nother level. But
I will not give away any spoilers, but we got an advanced screener of the Last Ride, the Taker documentary that airs on Sunday, and I'll write a little review tomorrow, free of spoilers because I don't want to ruin anything. But it's 55 minutes of must see like Taker television. It's really, really good. It reminded me a lot of the Jordan documentary in the sense that Jordan's approving this stuff, right? It's not necessarily true documentary, but it's still very, very riveting. Rich content, and that's what I took out of Taker as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to see him like the last year or so has been more open as far as doing out of character interviews. He did the Stone Cold show on and that was really interesting. I mean, the guy's been part of so much of wrestling history. He's been with the company for 30 years. There's so much he's seen, and you don't really hear anything. Like I would kill him.
How much of that was Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia to me changes everything because that could have ruined, and Raj just mentioned Goldberg too, being a legit star. That night could have ruined them both. It came, I mean, not even physically. Physically it was ugly, right? But that match was these two are old. They're washed up. And they've done a good job of restoring both of their images. But that was a bad night. I wonder if that was when Taker was like, "Hey, we got to change the method here because it's not all in ring stuff anymore."
Well, he wanted to have a good performance, and we talk about matches, character work and storylines are the most important thing, which they are, but you do have to have especially at this point some form of presentable match. The Goldberg Undertaker match wasn't really presentable, and it kind of undid a lot of the stuff that they were trying to go for with that match. And then so the story, I believe, or what I've heard, is that the Undertaker really wanted to have a good match, and Kurt Angle said, "Oh, you should work with AJ Styles, he'll do good stuff for you." And obviously, doing the pre-taped match and the Boneyard kind of style match helped them out a lot. But
with Undertaker and Goldberg, if you saw what they were trying to do, if they didn't mess up those moves after Goldberg had the concussion early in the match, who knows? If Goldberg didn't have that concussion, it would have been a different match, and I think it would have ended up being pretty good. But
the Saudi Arabia crowd is also. The Saudi Arabia, if you can do that match in almost any other market, and the fans will just carry it because they like the guys and they'll react to the big moves so much. When you're doing it in the Saudi Arabia shows, it's not to say that I know there are passionate fans there, so I'm not knocking that, but it's just a very different kind of tone for the show, and it's probably not the most conducive to a match of that kind of work. But anyway,
it was a perfect storm of things that if they, like Raj said, it probably was going to be okay. But unless everything goes wrong, and everything went wrong. Right. But they've made it, both those guys now, they've totally recovered. Goldberg you forget about that moment. Taker, for sure, you think of the Mania moment, for sure.
Right. So this was the last Saturday. Oh no, there was one more Saturday night's main event before WrestleMania 3. Savage versus George Steele again on the next one. So Battle Royal that had Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. We'll see how this one does. We'd love to do more of these.
I don't want to give anything away, but Andre, when he eliminates Hogan,
he just
It's I think Jesse says it's like throwing out the trash or something like that.
Right,
it's a really great Andre moment. Yeah.
Yeah, Andre was such an amazing heel back then. I remember he scared the crap out of me as a kid.
And it was the voice. It was
everything.
Everything. Yeah, it's hard to. It wasn't just the size. It was those awful shirts he would wear. I was disappointed last night in Dynamite because Jake Hager was in like a nice. Did he have a jacket on? But he had like a nice shirt and pants on.
Yeah.
For the first couple of months in AEW, he was wearing those like ugly Andre shirts, which is not fair. I'm sure they're nice shirts, but like they're weird. You know what I mean? Yeah. Andre always had these weird clothes.
Wasn't that fashion in the 80s?
No, Andre's
for a big guy. Jesse, for a big guy, where the hell you're Andre the Giant? Where do you shop? Right?
I'm not gonna lie, Justin. I was thinking about this yesterday. I was walking around my neighborhood and I was thinking, like, Andre wore like a lot of weird outfits. I wonder where he got them because it can't be easy for him to get clothes. He must have got them customized. And I was really thinking, I forget why I was thinking about that. But I was thinking,
with the patches on the elbow.
Andre, have you read the book yet? The Pat Lepard book?
Incredible. The parts.
Yeah, it's on my queue, but.
All right, so I won't ruin anything, but like to me, like his stretch in the United Kingdom, like wow, awesome. I think they covered the WWF stuff well too, but I feel like his childhood and early years.
The photos of young Andre are like amazing.
Yeah.
We were talking about that battle royal, Gabe Tuff, right? Yeah, Andre busted up Lenny Papa with that punch he hit him in.
Yeah.
Do you remember that angle where Andre was choking Hacksaw Duggan with his strap? And he just kept headbutting Hacksaw, and Hacksaw's bleeding. I remember being terrified as a kid. I'm like, he's going to kill him. And then Hacksaw knocked him out. And when Hacksaw was celebrating, I'm like, get out of there, you idiot. Run and leave the country. Andre, he was a different level of heel.
That Battle Royal too, somebody, I don't remember who it was it Coco? Somebody jumps in. It's like, it's the big Hogan Andre moment in that Battle Royal. And somebody that had no business getting in the middle of them gets in the middle of them. I feel like it was Coco Beware, but I'd have to go back and rewatch. I don't know if anybody can.
He's in the Hurricane Helm spot.
Jesse, we're all waiting for Hogan Andre. Everybody, and here comes the Birdman. Like, come on, but
yeah,
great memories.
Yeah. So putting a bow on this, what match of these stood out the most to you?
I think it's the opening match, to be honest. Even though, like, it's you could argue that like the Piper Adonis match is like a better worked match, but there's so much fire in the crowd is so into it, and it's so much clearly the main event. And I kind of like the old blue steel cage. I don't think it was as fun to work in as some other incarnations of it, but I think that's my favorite match.
For me, it was Savage, and I'm sure, like Raj said to start the show, they probably filmed this out of order. They probably filmed Hogan and Mr. Wonderful last, but I love the fact that even unbeknownst to him, or maybe they knew how it would air, I don't know, but I love that Savage is so intense that coming in after a major match, a cage match on television, like I still can't take my eyes off Randy Savage. He was so intense. He was so good. Somebody mentioned in the comments how he didn't have to turn babyface. The crowd forced him to, but he never changed his intensity. When Randy Savage was on screen, you couldn't help but look his way. He was just so good. For me, it was that Savage match. I love the cage match too, though. So many stars on this card.
Yeah, that cage match, that ending, I'll never forget it. That was an iconic ending with, the middle before the end where they both hit at the same time. But Savage, he's, in my opinion, one of the greatest of all time, combining ability and character and promo ability.
Speaking of Savage, if you were to take one of these guys and put them in 2020 WWE, who would you pick?
Good question, because Piper would thrive too. That's a tough one.
Yeah, because Hogan's promos, they don't age well. Like, I don't think he could do those promos today and get away with them.
They're different. I actually think Hogan was so good at like these 15-second to 30-second, just like bullet point style, like talk about my opponent, get my catchphrases in, like do all that kind of stuff like that, and it really worked. But like, do you think you could script Piper the way they script the guys now?
Good question.
Again, maybe if it wasn't in WWE,
Jesse would make this fun. Jesse would make Raw fun, but could he be Jesse? I mean,
right?
I don't know.
Howard Finkel. He couldn't. They don't even have anything close to that. So
Right.
it's tough to say in a scripted environment if Savage is having to do all these promos off a script, and they'd probably tell him, hey, stop doing the voice, or like you tone the clothes down. I don't know if maybe I don't know. I don't see them.
So the fact that Raj hasn't watched Goonies.
This was supposed to be a Goonies watch along, and Raj is like, "We're not doing that. We're watching Saturday night's main event." So
the next one, I hope that if I get asked back, I'd love to do a Sid watch along.
Absolutely.
I'm a Sid guy too, so I'm with you, Raj.
Yeah, absolutely. Sid was awesome.
Yeah, well, I was thinking
Master and ruler.
Like when I was thinking about like what's aged the best on this show, and we didn't talk about him that much, but like Mean Gene. And the way that they did the interviews back then, they did a ton of them, Mean Gene's all over the show. And he does such a good job selling what the guys are doing. Like we talked about the Savage promo, and obviously Savage is a star in the promo, but he's kind of unhinged. And when he leaves, Oakland steps in and is like, clearly the actions of George the Animal Steele are affecting Randy Savage. And he kind of sells the story to the audience,
right?
Which plays off of Savage's reaction. And like, just, I don't want to knock any of like the WWE interviewers now, because I'm sure they're
doing what they're told.
It's not really their fault, but you don't have that kind of obvious professionalism and the delivery and the ability to sell what these guys are doing. They usually just ask questions, and then the people say whatever their scripted promo is, and they get out. I miss that, and I feel like Oakland, like if you could have that kind of presence on the show, it would help these guys personality wise so much.
Absolutely. And to your point, they used to play off of each other. Now it's you say your line, and the backstage, and then they walk off, and the backstage interviewer just gives an odd daze, like either smiling or confused, and it's always the same. But may
have been Gene's last interview with the company before he passed, unfortunately, with AJ Styles at Raw 25. And even that, like Gene's interviews had energy. Like I think AJ did the something, Mean Gene, didn't he? Kind of a playback to Hulk. But yeah, Gene's another guy too. I mean, but again, could they be themselves? Could they be those versions of themselves in 2020? I don't know.
Yeah, you're talking about aging well. I think if you show today's fans the backstage stuff with Gene, and if you had them listen to Howard Finkel, and then you had them listen to Vince and Jesse on commentary, I would think that most people would prefer that to what we're getting today.
I agree.
I love Oakland. There's so many stories about him like pulling good interviews. Like if a guy was a bad promo, Oakland would like work with the guy and almost like do the promo for them. And so like he made so many people look good that weren't good, especially if you go back and watch like some of the AWA interviews. That was really like a special skill, and I don't know if we'll see someone like that. The closest I think I've seen in like recent years is like Jeremy Borash when he was doing the backstage stuff for TNA. Had kind of a similar vibe to him, but nowadays you just don't see it.
Yeah.
Can we touch on Justin Toner's comment?
Absolutely.
Because I remember the first time my brother and I saw that, we must have rewound that videotape like 45 straight till our mother was like, "What are you guys doing?"
Yeah.
And but it was like the craziest. I remember one F-bomb. It was like the biggest deal. And Jesse kind of knocks him after, I believe. I think it's like Jesse Shivani on the call. And Jesse's like, that's the Gene Okerlund that I know, and rips into him just enough to tease him. But it was so good.
Yeah, so Justin Toner pointing that his favorite was the F-bomb at SummerSlam 89 when the sign falls down before he talks to Rick Rude and Bobby Heenan. So actually, that was, they retaped that. And they played the wrong tape during the show. So they were supposed to play the correct one, and they accidentally played the wrong one. And then Jesse still, it wasn't like he didn't act like it didn't happen. He reacted to it. But that was great. And also, put that cigarette right out from Royal Rumble 92.
You could argue that's the most, maybe a tear in my eye is the most iconic line in that. But right behind it is, you put that cigarette out. Members of the press around, our esteemed members of the press around him. That was, Yeah.
Well, Okerlund was famous. He also had like a pretty big ego, and he kind of rubbed some, not everyone, but he rubbed some guys the wrong way because he knew how to do his job better than everyone else, and he knew that. And it's sometimes Okerlund.
Oakland, yeah.
Like, and it wasn't, and unfortunately, like, Vince thought he was old and didn't want to have him, do the interviews anymore, which let him go to WCW, which, like a lot of the WCW stars, was a mistake because he still had plenty of life left in him. I remember, but in WCW, he did the famous interview with Hogan in the, after the heel turn. He said, you can go to hell. And to see Gene Okerlund, who was so professional, to have him do that, it really, I say that like I was like watching the event live. I wasn't, obviously, but even in hindsight, it comes across. No, but like you're right, like it comes across like, oh my god, like even Gene's like just like so fed up with this.
See that?
I'd be curious if I get excruciated with this point of view, but I'm not saying he's better because he's not. Gene Okerlund's the best of all time in that role, but I think at the time, like if you look at the King of the Ring when Brett wins, and there's that great backstage interview with Brett and Perfect, and Gene kind of pulls the strings and does a great job. But Todd Pettengill during the new era, the new what was it called? The
new generation
was I think the better fit then. He was never better than Gene. I'm not saying that. I just think he was the better fit for the product they were trying to sell. And Gene fits so perfectly. Like you could argue Gene he doesn't have as many great moments, but man, he's got a lot of great moments with Flair, with Savage, with Hogan, and a bunch of Sting in WCW, the NWO.
Well, this show, like I said, we didn't really talk about Okerlund that much when the show was going on. But when I watched the show the first time, like he's basically on after every single match. He's bringing all these guys in and he's helping set up the angles. And it was such a key role to getting over all these various personalities. And it was really something that to me has aged the best as far as, being able to pull those personalities out. And that's why part of the reason we think of like the 80s, like, oh man, there's so many characters, so many personalities, is because they were put in a format that was like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Iconic. He was the best at what he did.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But Raj, we say that about Howard Finkel. Time there was no. People say, "Oh, Dusty could have been." I don't think anybody was better for that stretch of time than Hulk. Like just one after another, they were all perfect. Jesse, like they were all. That was like a championship team where everybody's performing at the highest level. That era of wrestling is just so special. Yeah. Tonight's show was, I think, a pretty good example of that.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I got to admit, sometimes these empty arena shows take their toll. But that was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Wouldn't you want to hear from the New Day, though? Like the New Day broadcasting one of these Saturday night. They could do so many fun things on Raw. Maybe not SmackDown, but Raw with 3 hours. You get so much time to have fun.
Dude, do you have Steve Austin and Bret Hart, call their match and do a watch along? So that's an hour of with commercials and everything. That's an hour of Raw.
Bret Hart was on this Hall. Yeah, Bret Hart was on like the Broken Skull session, and they just kind of went over the highlights.
Yeah,
they didn't show the whole match, but they went over the highlights of the famous match at WrestleMania 13, the I Quit match, and it's so good. They're talking about these little things. Bret Hart's like, yeah, when I give him the low, or I think it's Austin. It's like when I give him the low blow here,
right?
I'm giving him a real low blow, not one of those Ric Flair like forearm shots. And it's like, and here we're gonna do this spot. This is when that we blade and they don't notice because it's done so well, and this is why I'm doing the elbow drop like this, and this is why the cover is like this, and it's so good. I recommend it to anyone who's watching it.
And if you add in backstage footage that hasn't been seen, the promos before the match, maybe them screwing up the promos, things like that, I think that would keep an audience. At least try
not necessarily look at the rating to tell you if it's good or bad. The ratings do mean something, obviously, but I'd be really curious if they had watch-alongs with stars involved. To me, that would draw in viewers that wouldn't normally be watching, I would think.
I think you get old viewers.
If you did it right, too, you could do it without knocking that product or the current product. I think there's a way to kind of make all masters happy there. That's something AEW can't do. They have the best tape library in the world, right? Like, and you see I watch NBA TV almost every night just because they're showing so many hardwood classics, like the old games from the 80s, and it's so good. They're highlighting, and it makes you miss the NBA now more. So it's funny WWE hasn't tapped into that. You can even have current stars broadcast those matches, and I think it'd be cool. Yeah, it's strange they're not doing more, or again, it's the lack of creativity.
Well, and I feel like you could get fans back with that, because I'm watching The Last Dance, and I'm not even a basketball fan, and now I'm like, I want to start watching basketball. Like, I
watched the '98 All-Star Game last night. I'm with you. Yeah.
The big thing with they did do like older matches, like or not even older matches, but they were like a few weeks, maybe like a month ago when this whole thing first started, they showed like the Royal Rumble and they showed like last year's WrestleMania. But I always thought that was kind of strange because they were showing like stuff like that people obviously remember and saw within the past year, and they didn't just show like hey, here's the main event of SummerSlam 98. It's Steve Austin versus The Undertaker at Madison Square Garden. And maybe there's a reason why they don't want to do that, but to me, that's what would get more people watching would be that, as opposed to showing a match like the whole Royal Rumble that people watched like a few weeks ago.
And some of those things, Jesse, were just political. Like I wrote about this before. There was the day before Mania. I kind of wrote a behind the scenes of the, oddest WrestleMania. Not the Rumble one. I think that was to highlight Drew. But like the Mania stuff, you remember it was like the Brody Lee week where he was on AEW, he was on Fox, and then he was on ESPN, which is just weird. Right? He was on 3 different shows. But so WWE was airing the encore presentations of Mania on ESPN, which really upset some people at Fox. And that's why you saw, as kind of a Fox kind of digging their heels in a little bit, you'd see a match that was about to air that Sunday on ESPN, for like Cena Bray aired on SmackDown. Then 2 nights later it aired. That's the Brody Lee aired again on ESPN the next day, 2 days later. So to me, it didn't make any sense. It was more political behind the scenes stuff. To me, that doesn't make for good television. I wish they'd tap into the old stuff. And they're trying to sell the network, right? If you're showing me all this cool stuff, I think I'm more likely to subscribe. So I don't know.
I do have a question, though, and I agree with you guys 100%. But do you think if you showed, like, I bet you if you played an episode from 1998 of Raw, instead of one of these empty arena shows, I almost think it might do a better rating. But does it make the current product look uncool by doing
that's the
that?
Catch.
Yeah.
How do you do it with making the current product shine? That's the catch.
Yeah, I don't know. And actually, I think Brian Alvarez brought this up earlier this week, saying like, I think it was when they were doing the Triple H like anniversary stuff, and he was saying like they're cutting into stuff, and the crowd is going crazy for DX and all this kind of stuff, and then he cut back to the Performance Center, and unfortunately, whether true or untrue, and the answer is true, but like the fans right now already think that the guys in the Attitude Era are already much bigger, better stars than the people that they have currently. And when you kind of throw those side by side, and right now it's not the guy's fault because of, they have to do these empty arena shows, but it is an interesting idea that going back and like, oh man, remember that when wrestling was great? Now we've got this, that kind of thing.
You'd have to be strategic. Like to me, Aleister Black is a guy that could work post, say you ran Austin Hart, WrestleMania 13, which I think Sid was in the main event, but
Sid Undertaker was the main event.
I'm turning around. But say you had that match, and that's you say you put it in like the middle of Raw to keep the audience, and then you put, or whenever you put it on, who cares? You put Aleister Black in after, or AJ who just came back this week. I feel like if you pick the stars correctly on Raw and you had the right guys after, maybe there's a lot of people you wouldn't want to use in that role, but I feel like you'd really have to handpick your stars. Like I wouldn't want a long Seth Rollins promo after that match, but maybe like an Aleister Black squash match or something fun, something that makes me say, I want to watch more of this. Because that would be, I think it all goes back to you'd have more viewers. How do you keep those viewers with the current product? If you believe in your product, it's funny too. We all read and listened to Vince's conference call for with his board call. Right. He's so charming with his investors. It's like, I'd love to see more of this. We're watching every week. I don't know if the investors watch Raw every Monday. We do. People commenting here watch Raw every week. So so many times, though, I feel like we're treated like longtime smokers, right? We're always gonna buy another pack. With wrestling, we're always gonna watch, so they give us what they give us. But
they've said that, Justin. They've said that. Like Triple H and Vince have said that. We see people complaining online, but you know what? Those people are always going to watch. And I don't know how you can look at, where Raw viewership was 5 years ago and where it is today and say, oh, well, these people are always going to watch, because the fact is they're not.
Well, look where it is a month ago.
Always going to watch.
No, you're taking it for granted. Your time's not valuable. Well, your time's not valuable, but that's beside the point. I don't feel like that's a winning strategy. You should always value your consumers.
Well, and adapt. You're doing these empty arena shows. Change it up. I was saying, do a lot more realistic backstage, like the documentary stuff. Mm-hmm. But you could keep it scripted, but you have Vince and Triple H clashing about who should be on the show, and the wrestlers arriving and having natural dialogue, but not being happy with who they're booked with. And, just things like that. And then you lead to a few matches here and there, and you have those builds and just try different things. And that's one thing that's been hurting me watching the show, is they're trying to do the same show, but with no fans. And it's just tough.
Could you try to incorporate a piece of Hard Knocks from HBO, like player profiles? I know it was goofy, but it's been on my mind because of Dark Side. Dino Bravo in his weightlifting competition with the Warrior. That was silly and cartoonish, right? But could you do like a workout or a lift off between a couple of the guys or women? I mean, like, hey, maybe Rhea Ripley can lift just as much as Seth Rollins or somebody, right? Like you could see, this is in
what if the wrong person won?
Better television.
You could script it.
You'd have to script it. Like they used to. What was that? There was that famous thing. Like it was when Mark Henry was feuding with Ryback, and they were both like gonna have like a bench press contest, and it's like I don't know. It's whatever weight WWE said it was. Let's say it's 350 pounds, and Mark Henry does like 25 reps of it, and then like Ryback comes out and he does like 25 reps, like he's repping like 15 pounds, like he's totally gonna break it, and then like Mark Henry like comes in and attacks him.
Yeah, something like that, right? Which is kind of the same thing with Warrior Dino. It was very similar.
Yeah, didn't they do that angle with? I know they did it in UWF, but
the Earthquake.
Yeah, it was Warrior and Dino.
The Earthquake debut was like
the push-up contest.
Yeah, like I forget who it was. Ultimate Warrior, was it Dino Bravo?
Yeah.
So like they said that like they're gonna get a fan. It's a great angle. I wrote about it a few years ago, but like they said we're gonna get a fan out of the stands, the biggest fan we can find, and like. I think
all the fans are pointing. They weren't even
Harvey
plants.
Whippleman. Is it Harvey? I think it's Harvey Whippleman, but maybe not. Who's like in
Jimmy Hart, wasn't it?
Oh, Jimmy Hart. It's Jimmy Hart, and Hart like does like a real convincing job. Like he's actually looking for like the biggest fan, and people notice like, hey, there's this big guy right here, and he's like that guy, and it comes across. It feels like legitimate, and then of course he does he does like a push up with Warrior's going to do a push-up on him and he attacks him and everyone's like, oh my God, this fan attacked him. And then it ends up being Earthquake, but it's a great debut angle. And yeah, I mean, you could do that kind of stuff. You couldn't do that angle because there's no fans.
I'd like to see them do more stuff backstage because that in-ring is depressing to me, seeing it, you know?
And I feel like I agree. It doesn't work. I don't enjoy it, but if the less in-ring stuff you did, the more you like. The one thing they've done really well on SmackDown is Jeff Hardy. Like, I want to see Jeff Hardy wrestle. That's one guy I want to, because the videos have been so good, and so real and so not what they do now. Yeah. But I agree. Like to me, 2 matches, depending on what you show backstage, you could get away with very limited stuff in ring.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. This was really fun. This was exactly what I wanted it to be. Just shooting the.
Is this your favorite era of wrestling? Raj?
Me?
This is like your favorite. Like if you can go back and watch stuff, this is your favorite era.
Yeah. 87 to 90 for sure, and then after that it would be 96 to 99. What about you, Justin?
I agree, because right up to WrestleMania 8, it's just so star-studded. I know Jesse mentioned the WrestleMania 8 card wasn't great, but as a kid I was so caught up in the stars.
Oh, the card is good. The card is good. Yeah. The show isn't.
Right.
I liked the show as a kid. I remember.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, the highlights stick out because it was, like Brett, Roddy. I love that. I loved Brett as a kid. And I remember that. I remember liking Gene Oakland too. That was a great backstage interview with Gene, Brett, and Roddy too. One of their best. And Brett was kind of a guy that wasn't a promo guy, and that was a great interview. But yeah, I agree. That kind of the end of the golden era, and then the Attitude era. Sure. So I think a very underrated era, kind of like when Punk and Bryan got hot, it was so much fun. And it was like they couldn't control it. They didn't necessarily plan for those 2 guys to be their stars. What was it? The Rumble match? It was Cena Orton at the Rumble, and the crowd we'd seen too much of it at that point. But so some recent stuff too. But
yeah,
I guess those would be my 2-3 favorite eras. What about you, Jess?
Me?
Yeah.
I can't really answer the question because unfortunately, I don't really have memories from childhood of like great periods in WWE wrestling.
Raj and I are so old.
No, it's because I'm so young. I understand this. Like I would say like 2000, like I started probably watching WWE seriously like when I was in like 2005 when I was 10 or 11. And so like I have like WrestleMania 21. I had the DVD as a kid. I watched it a million times. I could tell you everything that happened on that show and all the angles and like the Shawn Michaels Kurt Angle match and Randy Orton Undertaker match and Cena versus JBL and all that kind of stuff like that. But when it comes to going back and watching stuff, I mean, I really love wrestling history. So I like watching stuff from the 70s. I like watching stuff from the 90s, from other companies. Like I watch a lot of All Japan in the 90s. I watch a lot of New Japan from the 90s. When it comes to WWF, I really like the Bret Hart stuff. I think he's my favorite like wrestler from like pre-2000. He's probably my favorite WWE wrestler ever, to be honest. Like as far as like, there's something about his matches and the kind of care and time he takes into the storytelling that and this isn't a knock on Shawn Michaels, but I just don't see that as much in prime Shawn Michaels matches. Like when Shawn came back after 2002, you do see that, and I love watching those matches too. But there's something about like the WrestleMania 13 match and the match against Austin at Survivor Series 96 that are just like, they're so well done, they're so perfect. So I would say, as far as when it comes to WWF, I would say like that era, but mainly because of Bret, because I know there wasn't a ton of other good stuff happening.
And you're getting me so worked up just thinking about it. You mentioned Bret, right? Like his good stuff. Like the Hall of Fame isn't happening, or it will, but like the people, like the Bulldog was getting inducted.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we see a Bulldogs Hart Foundation match on Raw? And you could
show the SummerSlam 92 match. That match is great.
Have the tag team guys commentate the tag team match if you want. If you do the IC title match, I mean, that'd be awesome to have Sammy on commentary for that and Daniel Bryan. Like, that'd be so cool.
Or Batista, he's supposed to be inducted. Have you do Batista and Triple H doing a watch along of his match with Triple H where he won the title, or the NWO where you're inducting them. Show that match with Hogan, Nash, and Hall on commentary. There's
SummerSlam.
Why we wouldn't want to watch. Like that's to me, that's the pinnacle of The
SummerSlam 92 is interesting because I don't know, Hogan isn't on the show. It's not really like, I don't think it's something that like is talked about that much. But you go back and watch it, I think because of the setup of Wembley Stadium, it's still like the most visually impressive crowd I've ever seen in wrestling. It's such a massive sea of people because the way the layout is, it's different than like, when they have it at like some like the modern like NFL stadiums. I don't know. And like that match it's such a great main event. It's like, the Intercontinental title in the main event, which is great for that. And they do such a good match. The finish is so clever. I mean, I would definitely be down to watch that. I would. Definitely.
And it makes sense. You're inducting the Bulldog in the hall. Like you'd be like, why are you throwing this on? Though I wish they'd show older. Like they should show Bruno stuff. I know Vince and Bruno didn't have the greatest relationship, but like he's a star. Like
the only thing I'll say about that is that stuff, the wrestling style hasn't aged that well.
And
but if you want to like an 8-minute clips, you
could show like Bruno wrestling Randy Savage, like when Bruno was there in the late 80s, and it still looks good on TV.
The Larry Zbyszko, Bruno Sammartino feud, you can those promos, Bruno's promos like in 1980 are so good. And so you could show that kind of stuff. And that would be interesting because I think most people know, like at this point, especially with the Hall of Fame, like, oh yeah, Bruno Sammartino, he was a really big star, but they probably haven't watched that many Bruno Sammartino matches.
Yeah.
Another one is
I could probably count on one hand how many full Bruno matches I've watched.
Yeah,
not many.
Yeah,
I agree. This is a great. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's a really quick moment in the Undertaker documentary. It's backstage at the Hall of Fame. It's Bruno and Taker, and they just it's a quick handshake.
Oh, that's
maybe my favorite moment of that whole thing was like Bruno shaking hands with Taker. Like, how cool is that? So
yeah, it's like when Bill Russell comes out and gives out the Finals MVP award. It's like, oh my God, it's Bill Russell, and then it's like the same thing. It's like he's just like at that point he's just so legendary that you can't even believe that he's there.
Iconic, right? Yeah, I agree.
All right, guys. Well, let's do this. Let's do this again. Hopefully next week or very soon. But we'll see the feedback. Guys, send us your feedback. Tweet us, DM us. We'll see how the podcast numbers do as well. And love to keep doing this because this was a lot of fun.
If you took time to listen to, thank you very much. We had a blast. I know we hope you enjoyed listening too.
And Justin, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Sure. Tomorrow we'll have Friday will be we'll have I'll give some takeaways from the Last Ride documentary. No spoilers, so it won't ruin anybody's viewing experience. Also a feature with Aleister Black, which goes into his background a little bit more, the connection between Tommy End and how he became Aleister Black in WWE, a little bit of his history with his parents. Saturday we'll run a story with Kofi Kingston about his favorite ladder matches. And I want to kind of hear about, if you ever have any questions that you want me to ask, feel free to tweet me too. But I want to hear what Kofi has to say about some of the other iconic ladder matches as well. So that'll be this weekend. And then I'm looking forward to covering Money in the Bank on Sunday. And we'll see. I hope there's a chance to show some. We've been talking the last, half hour, 40 minutes about creativity. I really hope we see some at Money in the Bank.
Absolutely. And Jesse, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
I got an article coming out tomorrow. It's kind of addressing the Mount Rushmore question that has been kind of making the rounds on social media, the Mount Rushmore of WWE wrestlers. And I think Jim Ross said that John Cena was on it. So, of course, everyone got mad. So I do kind of like a breakdown of who is on the Mount Rushmore. Is John Cena, on that? We'll see. I try to be as objective as possible, looking at who drew, who was drawing, how long did they draw for, what was the business like when they were around. So trying to see, like, if John Cena, is he really one of the four biggest names, or is he nowhere close, and if not, who is?
Absolutely. Well, and that will be on WrestlingInc.com, and keep checking out WrestlingInc.com. Check out Sports Illustrated, their wrestling section. Justin Barrasso, he does just an amazing job. And I hope Jesse
has Sid.
He better be.
It's actually just Sid, like in four different times.
He takes it's just different. It's Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, Psycho Sid, and just Sid.
Horseman Sid, right?
Just Lord Humongous.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I'm not saying this because he's on the podcast. Out of everyone in the working for a mainstream media publication, I think Justin does the best job covering pro wrestling from an objective point of view. There's a huge surge in it, but I think Justin with Sports Illustrated he's doing a tremendous job talking about wrestling, and it's such a big platform. Yeah,
you're not saying we're mainstream. What are you trying to say? Wrestling Inc.'s not mainstream.
Well, I respect what you guys do, because occasionally, now Raj and I, we're wrapping up, and I keep bringing us back in, but like Raj and I had a discussion. I don't remember when. It wasn't in person. It was over the phone, so I could probably figure out when it was. But every now and again, I'll break and do, an NBA. I've done some stuff for the Jordan documentary. But, like, I love that Wrestling Inc., to me, it's such a competitive site, or the wrestling sites in general, because, like, it's all wrestling. Like, I feed off that. Like, I love the fact that, like, if Jesse's story, you want to click on that, well, there's, like, 11 other cool things on Wrestling Inc. or whatever site, right? WrestleZone or Lords of Pain, whatever. I like that. Or you go to the Observer site or whatever it is. I like that, that competitive feel amongst writers. And if you want to write something, it's got to be good to meet that standards. But thank you very much for the kind comment too. I love covering pro wrestling. I hope people enjoy reading it, and I hope we have fun Sunday. I mean, Sunday to me is a big opportunity, because I feel like many AEW is going to have a really special show with Double or Nothing. I wonder if WWE can do it. Like, can they be creative again, or was Vince just kind of being charming to his investors? I think Sunday's a big night. We'll see.
Please be creative again. You're killing me right now. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you all again soon.